I once watched a video of Oprah Winfrey speaking, and ever since, I wanted to speak like her, but in Chinese. The issue is, I don't have access to these people, let alone Chinese speakers. But I do have access to the next best thing. Podcasts. Assuming podcasters are one of the best speakers on this planet, surely if I become one, I'll be also labeled as a great speaker. I had 2 criteria for choosing the types of podcasters I would study. 1, their topics had to align with my own. I knew I wanted to discuss self-discovery, social media, and relationships. Ain't no way I was talking about science, my friends. But 2, they also had to be engaging. Either they had some sort of humor, or they spoke with some sort of elegance. Because I'm a very funny and elegant individual.
You need a man with strong, independent women. No, I did not.
This narrowed down my options to Peggy for Show, AV Lila, Angel Talks. And many weeks later, I was finally able to release a few episodes of my own. It did take a lot of experimentation and learning though. So if you are thinking of doing the same and leveling up your speaking, I think I might just be able to help you. So today we're going to be discussing everything I learnt about comprehensible input, how I'd acquire vocabulary, and my system that will help you break out and use more sophisticated vocabulary to sound more like this.
我终于有一刻 and I realized I don't want to be a software engineer. 因为我把自己的身份和这个学位绑得太近，还陷入了沉没成本的陷阱，所以这个发现特别难受。我觉得很多年轻人都被世故绑架了。在学校，成功很容易定义，可毕业之后，我们对成功只有一些模糊的想象。
Comprehensible input is a term thrown around a lot. The goal of comprehensible input is based on the idea that language is best acquired when it is understood, rather than through explicit instructions like textbook learning. Usually, understanding around 90% is the sweet spot. And as far as we can tell, comprehensible input seems to work. There's a whole community that worships this theory. You simply get a lot of this comprehensible input, and after hundreds or thousands of hours, you'll intuitively pick it up. And 10x-ed is a method that specifically applies to Japanese. Every day, you learn 15 to 30 new words from your comprehensible input, and then you put it through some vocab acquiring system, usually Anki, such that you get it into your long-term memory. And I did that, kinda, without the Anki. I listened to Mandarin podcasts almost daily, take the words and phrases that I didn't know, and then review them by just listening to the podcast again every 2 to 5 days. Every podcast from the same creator got easier and easier to follow over time. Because I watch a lot of relationship content, even words like emotional abuse. Girl, I know that from the back of my mind. 兴趣勒索, brother. And podcasts aren't the only way to get your comprehensible input. Steve's own video on vocabulary growth talks a lot about extensive reading, and I'm currently trying out his method with Japanese, which I'll probably review in a later video. But after months of re-listening to the same few podcasts, I thought I'd acquired all the vocab. After all, I understood like 98% of the content, right? Until I tried speaking to my Chinese friend. It was pretty clear that although I had acquired this vocabulary, I still couldn't use it. And when researching more into the whole 10x-ed method, I started to doubt whether this method really worked. You see, I glossed over a big part about this whole input theory. For you to start seeing results, it requires hundreds or thousands of hours of input. Children are exposed to this constantly from their parents talking to them. Unfortunately, for us learning foreign languages, we don't have that luxury. And at the rate things were going, listening to 1 hour of podcasts a day, I'd probably reached the level I wanted to achieve in 6 years. So from then on, I decided to change my approach. Because let's be real, you might be taking the hard route in language learning, and you might not even realize it. If you're learning Mandarin, but you're surrounded by Cantonese or were brought up speaking it, you've already got a massive head start. And especially for us ABCs or BBCs, who just want to reconnect with their family and friends and learn more about our cultural heritage, I'm looking for anything to get me out of that embarrassment when someone starts speaking to me in Chinese. With the CantoToMando school, not only do you get personalized teaching, where there's a focus on real-life Mandarin practice, you also get a coach that understands the struggle of being an ABC or BBC. CantoToMando pushes the idea of the copy and paste method. It's where you simply draw parallels between Cantonese and Mandarin rather than learning it from a very disconnected language like English. This makes your Chinese feel even more natural and lets you reconnect with your culture and identity. But it's a course, so surely it requires a lot of time. A lot of the students are actually doctors or accountants or other professionals, and they have only spent 15 to 20 minutes a day on this course to achieve really great results. And if you'd like to tie in your profession with your Chinese learning too, CantoToMando is constantly updating their courses, and they offer a lot of specialized courses for different professions. The lessons are thoughtfully crafted, highlighting the main mistakes Cantonese speakers make when they try and learn Mandarin. But my personal goal goes even deeper. I want fruitful conversations with people around me. And that means we have to talk about emotions. CantoToMando has exactly that. They literally have role-based scenario lessons about talking to family members about your mental health. So if you're interested in graduating from more traditional methods of learning, but instead focusing on the patterns and rhythm of the language, for starters, you can book a free call with a coach so they can assess your Cantonese directly and then get access to a free language guide. In this guide, you get access to a mini course where you can start learning and gauge whether you want to start working together with CantoToMando. So if you're looking to shortcut your Mandarin or Cantonese journey as an ABC or BBC, check out the link below to get your free mini guide. Thank you to CantoToMando for sponsoring this video. Looking back at my current system, there is a rather big bottleneck. My system relied on spaced repetition, but it was incredibly inefficient. Since all I do would be re-listening to podcasts, it might take 40 minutes of the 60-minute episode for a word I was learning to resurface. And so, in the back of my mind, a dangerous thought started to emerge. But there's something you must know about me. I'm stubborn, and maybe one day I will be forced to use Anki. But today is not the day, and finding a solution that doesn't require me to use Anki spurred me on even more. Look, Anki would have definitely sped up the acquisition process, and I think Anki does a very good job at doing what it does, spaced repetition. But hear me out, okay? Vocabulary gets surfaced to you very randomly. Compared to when you re-listen with podcasts, there's a certain narrative or there's a certain story that you follow. And I know that there is a tagging system where you could categorize your vocab into different themes. But there's still something that irks me. It's the way the vocabulary just seems to appear out of order. But I did find a way. If you're like me, you gotta be on the move. Otherwise, I can get a little bit fidgety, and podcasts let you listen anywhere at any time. So the question is, how can we use passive input like podcasts and then remember the vocab? How do we actually hustle? Initially, I didn't track my vocabulary at all. I just listened to the podcast, search up a word on a dictionary, and then realized, crap, I have seen this word before. But this system meant I didn't know how many times I've seen the word or how familiar I was with it at all. Ideally, I want to see all my vocab categorized by theme and in an order that makes sense to me, and be able to check my progress on that word, which is why I wasted so much time on a Notion board. Now hear me out. I know it looks like a replica of Anki, just without the spaced repetition feature, but it's not, okay? So I separate my vocab into different decks depending on each podcast episode. And as the podcast unfolds, I would jot down the new vocabulary, noting down the sentence or context that each word comes in, and any other extra information I feel like putting in. Now, this takes a long time, so usually I do this while I'm traveling. But if you guys don't want to do that, don't worry, because I've made some sample vocab decks for you guys to check out. But the main issue is knowing how to review. Now, the meta in the language learning community is to use spaced repetition systems, but we all know how that usually goes. You've recalled a word when you remember its translation, and this actually slows down your speaking. You don't want to keep translating back and forth between languages. So I figured I'd challenge this whole flashcard thing a little bit. And so unlike flashcards where we keep reviewing until death, I set a limit for myself. I have to use the word 7 times in 7 different contexts. While going out on walks or just during the day, I take out my vocab deck and try and summarize the whole podcast episode in my own words. Eventually, I have to use some of the words in my vocab deck, not because I'm trying to memorize them, but because the ideas that I'm talking about has led me there. It's all about the intentional output, my brothers. And if you're unsure about how to structure your summary, you can actually use your vocab deck as your anchor. Sometimes I go through the vocab deck sequentially from top to bottom, or other times I try and change up the order a little bit. It's really up to you. Whenever I get stuck, that's when I glance at the vocab word and then try and explain the idea or concept the podcaster had. This usually sparks more thoughts, ideas, and output. Well, what about the whole spaced repetition thing? I've been trying to incorporate that for a few months now, but I realized it's actually just already part of the system. The thing is, I usually circle between 3 podcasters, and many of their topics overlap. Back to the 3 that I watch. Peggy for Show talks about social media, friendships, relationships. Angie Talks is all about self-discovery and personal development. AB Laila is about career, life, and relationships, and so these vocabularies naturally reappear in all of the content that I watch. Not because of any scheduling, but simply because of my interests. So in this case, I don't worry about perfect spaced repetition and doing my flashcards every day, but just consistency in getting as much comprehensible input as I can. The last step is just tracking how familiar I am with a word with just a simple visual. I am going to be honest, I set a challenge for myself to use a word 7 times for me to fully acquire it, but just by using it 3 or 4 times during my walks, I can already use it naturally in conversations. And that basically sums it up. Strangely, I don't really see this method talked about in the language learning community at all. So I thought it'd just be interesting to share what I've come up with. And if you're interested, I made a free Notion template down below, which you can download and use for yourself. If you hate mining vocabulary, you can follow my podcasts that I do in Mandarin. And through this method, you can also follow my Mandarin speaking progress too. Each minisode will also come with the transcript and also the whole Notion vocabulary system thing, which you can get if you join my Patreon. It would also be the best place for you guys to support me if you would like. So, what is the takeaway? Should you just ditch your Anki, start talking to yourself, and boom, 10 times your speaking vocabulary? Not exactly. But once you start hitting that vocabulary plateau, or when you find yourself understanding way more than your current speaking level, you gotta start pushing yourself to use these new vocabulary rather than just relying on these passive techniques. So, that's the method. All the links to my Notion, Spotify, and Patreon will be in the description, and I'll see you there. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.